Something happened last night that the mainstream media is either too scared or too compromised to tell you the full truth about. Donald Trump went on national television, prime time, and delivered what many are now calling the single most dangerous, most incoherent, most embarrassing presidential address in the history of this country. And I'm not saying that to be dramatic. I'm saying that because when you actually break it down, claim by claim, word by word, what was said last night should terrify every single American, regardless of your political affiliation. We did not air this speech live here on the Prime Alert, and I want to explain exactly why, because this is important. When a sitting president goes on television and makes statements that could trigger international incidents, spike oil prices, and send global markets into a panic, you deserve more than a raw feed. You deserve context. You deserve facts. You deserve someone who's actually going to stop the tape and say, wait, hold on, that's not true. That's a war crime. That makes no sense. What does that even mean? That's what we do here. That's why you're here. So buckle up, because tonight we are going frame by frame through one of the most alarming presidential addresses ever delivered on American soil. And by the time this video is over, you're going to understand exactly what was said, exactly why it matters, and exactly what it means for you, your family, your wallet, and this country's future. Stay with me. This is going to be a lot. Section 1, the setup, why this speech matters. Before we get into the actual content of this speech, let me give you a 30-second reset on where we are as a country right now, because context is everything. The United States is currently engaged in military operations against Iran. This was not authorized by Congress. There was no declaration of war. There was no proper consultation with our allies. It happened, and now, in the aftermath of that, with oil prices surging, with global markets rattled, with American soldiers coming home in flag-draped caskets, the President of the United States went on television last night to speak to the American people. This was supposed to be a moment of clarity, a moment of leadership, a moment where a president looks into the camera and gives the nation something, reassurance, a plan, honesty, anything. What we got instead was something very, very different. Our editor-in-chief, Ron Filipski, watched the entire address and described it this way, and I want you to really hear this. He said, was the entire point of tonight's speech to show the nation just how badly this president is deteriorating. The slurred words, the low energy, the incoherent rambling, the nonsensical leaps from one topic to the next. If that was the goal, mission accomplished. And here's the thing. The markets agreed. Because while Donald Trump was still on screen delivering this address, oil prices were already moving. Crude oil surged past $103 per barrel. Brent crude approached $106 per barrel. And analysts are saying we should expect those numbers to keep climbing. The American people didn't like what they heard. Our allies around the world were disgusted. And the enemies of the United States, they were laughing out loud in real time. Now let's get into exactly what was said, because the details here are extraordinary. Section 2, we have all the cards. Donald Trump opened this address with a line that I want you to think about very carefully. He looked into the camera. The President of the United States, representing 335 million Americans, speaking to a global audience. And he said, and I quote directly, "We have all the cards. They have none. I have all of the cards." Now, on the surface, that sounds tough, right? Strong, dominant. Presidential, maybe if you squint hard enough, but here's the problem. Here's the giant, catastrophic, embarrassing problem with that statement. Iran controls the Strait of Hormuz. The Strait of Hormuz is one of the most strategically critical choke points on the entire planet. Approximately 20% of the world's oil supply, 20%, passes through that strait. If that strait gets shut down or even significantly disrupted, the global economy doesn't just slow down, it convulses. Gas prices don't just go up a few cents, they explode, supply chains fracture, economies that depend on that oil, including allies of the United States, go into crisis mode immediately. That's not a small card. That is the card. That is the single most powerful geographic leverage point in the entire Middle East conflict. And the President of the United States just went on national television and either didn't know that or chose to pretend it wasn't true, which is worse. Genuinely, which is worse, that he doesn't understand one of the most basic geopolitical realities of the conflict he started, or that he understands it and is lying directly to your face? Think about that while we keep going. Section 3, the war crimes admission. Now this next part, this is where things escalate from embarrassing to genuinely dangerous, and I need you to pay very close attention here because this is not hyperbole. This is not political spin. What I'm about to walk you through is a sitting American president on live television describing actions that under international law constitute war crimes. Here's what Trump said. I want to be precise. He said, and I'm paraphrasing closely here, that if no deal is reached, the United States will hit, and I'm using his words now, each and every one of Iran's electric generating plants, very hard and probably simultaneously. He also said, still his words, that they haven't hit Iran's oil infrastructure yet, even though it's the easiest target. And then he said they could hit it, it would be gone, and there's nothing Iran could do about it. Let me stop right there. Under international humanitarian law, specifically the Geneva Conventions and their additional protocols, deliberately attacking civilian infrastructure is prohibited. Electric power plants that serve civilian populations are protected infrastructure. Deliberately destroying them is not a military tactic. It is a war crime, full stop. Now, I understand that people will disagree about the conflict itself. I understand there are different perspectives on U.S.-Iran relations, on nuclear proliferation, on what options are on the table. That's a legitimate debate. But this is not that debate. This is a president going on national television and openly describing what would constitute war crimes if carried out. And this is the part that made foreign policy analysts around the world visibly uncomfortable, he handed that footage directly to the Iranian government as propaganda material. Think about it from the Iranian government's perspective for one moment. They don't need to fabricate a villain. They don't need to manufacture outrage. They just need to translate what was said and play it on state television. The American president said he will bomb us back to the Stone Age where we belong. That's a direct quote. Back to the Stone Age, where they belong. Now, let me be very clear about something here, and because Trump makes no distinction, and that distinction matters enormously. Iran's government, the Islamic Republic regime, is one thing, and the Iranian people, with one of the oldest and richest civilizations in human history, thousands of years of art, culture, language, science, and tradition, they are something entirely different. When you say you're going to bomb people back to the Stone Age where they belong, you are talking about human beings, ordinary people, families, and you just became the best recruiting tool the Iranian regime has ever had. This is amateur hour. This is what a corny cartoon villain says, and it is genuinely, deeply dangerous. Section 4, the Strait of Hormuz humiliation. Let's keep moving, because this speech had layers, and every layer was somehow worse than the one before it. After threatening war crimes, Donald Trump pivoted to what is honestly one of the most stunning moments of geopolitical surrender I have ever seen a U.S. president deliver publicly. He turned his attention to other nations, countries that depend on oil flowing through the Strait of Hormuz, and essentially told them, not our problem anymore. Go handle it yourself. His actual suggestion? And again, I'm not editorializing here. This is what he said. He told these nations to, in his words, build up some delayed courage. He said they should have done it before. He said the hard part is done. He said Iran has been essentially decimated. And he said, go to the strait and just take it. Just take it. Let's put this in context for a second, because the context is devastating. Before this military operation began, the United States was publicly insisting that it would protect freedom of navigation in the Strait of Hormuz. There were discussions about naval deployments. There was talk of building a coalition, an armada, the word was actually used, to ensure that oil continued to flow freely through that strait. That was the promise. That was the posture. And now, after the operation, after American soldiers have died, the president is on television telling other nations that they're on their own. Go figure it out. Build up some delayed courage. Imagine you are a U.S. ally right now. Imagine you are a nation in the Middle East or Europe or Asia, a country that took political risks to support or at minimum not oppose this operation. And now you're watching the President of the United States on live television tell you that the strait you depend on for your energy security is your responsibility, and he wishes you luck. That's not strength, that's abandonment, and it's being seen that way around the world in real time. Section 5. I'll cherish it. And then I genuinely could not believe this when I heard it. Then he told these same nations that they need to cherish the Strait of Hormuz. Cherish it. The President of the United States used the word cherish in a geopolitical address about one of the most volatile military situations on the planet. He said, the countries of the world that do receive oil through the strait must take care of that passage. They must cherish it. I'll just let that sit for a moment. This is the commander-in-chief of the most powerful military in human history, and he's using the language of a greeting card to describe oil transit security in the middle of an active war zone. What does cherish it mean? What is the actionable policy there? What does a nation do operationally when the President of the United States tells them to cherish a body of water? There is no answer, because there is no policy. There is only a man behind a podium who is visibly struggling to get through a teleprompter and filling the gaps with whatever words surface first. Section 6, the oil market's reality check. Now let's talk about something that affects every single person watching this video right now. Something that hits you directly in your wallet every time you pull up to a gas pump or buy groceries or pay a utility bill. Trump said, and this one genuinely made my jaw drop, he said that because of his drill baby drill program, America has plenty of gas. He said we have so much gas. He said, under his leadership, we are the #1 producer of oil and gas on the planet. And then, in what is either stunning ignorance or deliberate deception, he used this as the basis for why Americans shouldn't worry about rising gas prices. Let me explain why this is completely factually wrong. And I'm going to do it simply so there's no confusion. Even if the United States produces more oil than anyone else on Earth, and by the way, production levels were already high under Biden, oil is traded on international markets. It is priced globally. When there's a disruption in the Strait of Hormuz, when there's instability in the Middle East, when supply fears spike, the price of oil goes up everywhere, including here, including at your local gas station. It does not matter how much oil is sitting under American soil. That's how markets work. That's how they've always worked. And any first-year economics student can tell you this, but it gets worse. Because while Trump was on television telling Americans not to worry about gas prices, crude oil had already cracked $103 per barrel. Brent crude was approaching $106, and analysts were projecting those numbers heading higher. So we have a president who started a war that is directly causing oil prices to spike, going on television to tell Americans there's no problem, while the markets are live ticking in real time, showing exactly how much of a problem there is. And then, this is the part that might make your blood pressure spike. He said there's no inflation. His exact words, no inflation. In the year 2025, after years of prices that have brutalized working and middle-class Americans, after people have been choosing between groceries and prescriptions, after rent has become functionally unaffordable for a generation of Americans, no inflation. People can't afford gas, they can't afford groceries, they can't afford rent. They are psychologically exhausted, living paycheck to paycheck, if they're lucky enough to have a paycheck at all. And the man standing in front of the presidential seal is telling them there's no inflation and that the stock market is at record highs. The stock market is not your 401k if you don't have one. And even if you do, it's been tanking. The markets have been cratering, and we are in what economists are now calling a jobs recession. But no inflation, record highs. So much gas. Section 7, the gasoline blame game. Here's where the internal logic of this speech completely collapses. And I want to highlight this because it's important. Within the same address, Donald Trump made two claims that directly contradict each other, and both of them cannot be true simultaneously. Claim 1, Iran has been essentially decimated. They've been obliterated. The hard part is done. Claim 2, The rising gasoline prices are entirely Iran's fault because they are launching terror attacks against commercial oil tankers and neighboring countries. Do you see the problem? If Iran has been decimated, if they've been knocked back to the Stone Age, if they have no cards, if they're essentially finished, then how exactly are they simultaneously launching coordinated terror attacks against commercial shipping lanes and striking neighboring countries with drones and missiles? Either they're obliterated or they're not. Either they have military capacity or they don't. You cannot have it both ways in the same speech, but that is exactly what happened last night. And it matters because this isn't just a logical inconsistency. It reveals something critical about the actual situation on the ground. Iran still controls the Strait of Hormuz. Iran still has Shahed drones. Iran still has FPV drones. Iran still has ballistic missiles capable of targeting American military bases and American economic interests in neighboring Arab nations. The reality on the ground does not match what is being said from behind the presidential podium. Section 8, Dover Air Force Base and the families. This next section of the speech is the one that genuinely moved me, and not in the way Trump intended. He talked about visiting Dover Air Force Base. Twice in the past month, he said, he traveled there to be present as American soldiers came home in flag-draped caskets. And that part alone carries weight. Those are real people. Those are real families, real sons, daughters, husbands, wives, mothers, fathers. And that grief is sacred and real. But then Trump did something that has drawn direct pushback from actual military families. He said, and I want to be precise, that every single one of the families he met with said, "Please, sir, please finish the job." Every one of them. Every single one. That's not what some families are saying. We have heard directly from military families who are asking very different questions. Not "please finish the job," but "why did my family member die for this? What was the mission? Who authorized this? Was it worth it? Was my child's life spent on something that was planned, legal, and necessary?" Those are the questions some of these families are carrying. And when a president goes on national television and claims unanimous support from grieving military families, claiming they all said the same thing, and that's not accurate, that is not just a political misstep. That is a profound disrespect to the grief and the complexity of what those families are actually experiencing. Section 9, the nuclear deal, Obama, and sanctions. Trump spent a portion of the speech boasting about terminating what he called Barack Hussein Obama's nuclear deal. He emphasized the middle name. He said he was proud to terminate it. He said he was honored to do it. He said it was bad from the beginning. And then he claimed Obama gave Iran plane loads of cash. That's false. That claim has been fact-checked repeatedly by independent organizations, and it is false. The funds that were returned to Iran during that period were Iranian assets that had been frozen, money that legally belonged to Iran, returned as part of a negotiated settlement. That is not the same as giving them cash. But the plane loads of cash line keeps getting repeated because it sounds dramatic and it works on an audience that doesn't have the context. Here's the context that Trump did not provide. Since Trump withdrew from the nuclear deal during his first term, the withdrawal he is now bragging about, Iran's nuclear program has advanced significantly. They went from being constrained under the deal to dramatically increasing uranium enrichment levels. The deal wasn't perfect, no deal is, but it was functional. It was verified. And after it was torn up, Iran's path to nuclear capability accelerated. And there's more. While Trump is sanctioning Iran, he quietly removed sanctions on Iranian oil, which has allowed Iran to earn an estimated $14 billion in that period. He has also removed sanctions on Russian oil. Russia, the country that has been actively assisting Iran in targeting American interests in the region. The country whose legislative members, the equivalent of Russian senators, were recently touring the United States Capitol building with MAGA Republican congressional members. Russia has been benefiting from lifted American sanctions while simultaneously helping Iran. And Trump has spent years attacking NATO, calling it a paper tiger, suggesting America should withdraw, parroting positions that align perfectly with what Vladimir Putin wants. While all of this is happening simultaneously, that's the context. That's what the speech left out. Section 10, Venezuela. I almost didn't believe this one when I heard it. I replayed it multiple times to make sure I was hearing it correctly. Donald Trump, in the middle of this presidential address about Iran, stopped to brag that American troops took Venezuela. Those were his words. He said, and I'm quoting directly, "I also want to thank our troops for the masterful job they did in taking the country of Venezuela in a matter of minutes. It was quick, lethal, violent, and respected by everyone all over the world. Taking the country. The United States military took the country of Venezuela in a matter of minutes." I want to be very careful here and precise because this claim raises enormous questions that demand answers. When did this happen? Under what legal authority? Was Congress informed? Were allies informed? What does taking a country mean? What is the current status of Venezuela? What are the long-term implications? And why was this dropped into a speech about Iran like a casual aside? These are not small questions. These are enormous, consequential questions, and they were not answered. They were just dropped into the speech between the Iran claims and the closing remarks like someone forgot where they were in the script. Section 11, the ending and the overall picture. The speech ended, and it ended in a way that was, there's really no other word for it, strange. He talked about the whole world watching, about strength and brilliance, about the United States being safer and stronger and more prosperous and greater than ever. Standard closing language delivered with low energy and visible difficulty reading from the teleprompter. And then it was over. And in the silence after it ended, here's what remained. Oil at $103 a barrel and climbing, markets unsteady, allies confused and in some cases openly alarmed, enemies emboldened and handed a library of propaganda clips. Military families whose grief is being used as political ammunition without their full consent. Working Americans being told there's no inflation while they can't afford to fill their tanks. A strait that we promised to protect that we're now telling other nations to handle themselves. War crime admissions on tape. A claim that we've taken Venezuela. And a man who said cherish it in reference to oil transit security in an active war zone. That is the full picture of last night. Closing the Prime Alert. Here at the Prime Alert, we made a deliberate decision not to air this speech live. We make that decision every time, and moments like tonight are exactly why, because you deserve more than a raw feed. You deserve someone who's going to stop the tape and do the work, someone who's going to fact check in real time, give you the context that's missing, and trust you to handle the truth even when the truth is uncomfortable. The information in this video, every claim, every fact, every piece of context, that's the standard we hold ourselves to here. Not perfect, but honest, and always working for you. If this video gave you something, share it. Send it to someone who needs to see it, because right now more than ever, independent media that does this work is essential. We are up against enormous pressure to stay silent, to soften the edges, to not make people uncomfortable. We're not going to do that. We are working towards 7 million subscribers, and every single person who shares this video, who subscribes, who supports this channel, you are part of keeping this kind of journalism alive. Hit subscribe, share this video, and we will see you in the next one. This is the Prime Alert. Stay informed, stay alert, stay free. What was improved? Editor's notes, hook rewrite. The original opened mid-commentary. The new version opens with a mystery and a direct promise, creating immediate tension and a reason to keep watching. Pacing. The original jumped rapidly between clips without building tension between them. The new version uses deliberate section breaks with escalating stakes, so each new revelation feels earned. Open loops. Phrases like, and it gets worse, stay with me, and think about that while we keep going, keep the viewer psychologically engaged across a long runtime. Emotional triggers. Added specific emotional language around military families, working class economic pain, and national pride shame, all grounded in facts already present in the original. Contradiction highlighting. The Iran decimated versus Iran is attacking ships. Contradiction was present in the original but buried. It's now its own dedicated section because it's one of the strongest logical moments in the piece. Brand integration. The Prime Alert is woven throughout naturally, in the opening, closing, and throughout the body, reinforcing channel identity without feeling forced. Sonnet 4.6 Claude is AI and can make mistakes. Please double check responses.